theme song for the Gear Podcast. Uncle Leon, how you going? How you going, mate?
Pretty awesome, mate. What about yourself? You had a good weekend?
Yeah, I'm fine. I just you hit me with the knowledge about 20 seconds ago that you traitorous bastard, you've jumped to Logic Pro, you fool.
Mate.
How dare you?
Michael Nielsen told me, and he's a friend of the podcast, so that episode may have been the one that absolutely pushed me over the edge. But the thing that pushed me over the edge, Troy, we're just getting straight in. Pro Tools wanted $300 for a year-long license.
Yep.
Now, I can pay $1 less than that and get an infinite license from Logic. And all I've got to do is learn their stupid key commands and a bunch of other stupid stuff. But they also had a 90-day free trial. So, this is not sponsored by Apple or anything, but I'm in the middle of a 90-day free trial. And I think I did a similar thing with Final Cut and DaVinci Resolve, because you can get DaVinci Resolve for $0 and use it to edit videos. So why pay for Final Cut? And I was using a cracked version of it for, well, let's just say a couple of years. Rather than actually shell out money for it, I just went with DaVinci. So there was a learning curve with that. And there's definitely a learning curve with Logic. And there's a bunch of stuff I actually miss with Pro Tools. And I'm not saying I won't ever do it, but I'm just gonna give it a shot. Having a go. The Australian way, Troy. Don't be great, just have a go.
As long as we can both agree that we won't be going to Reaper anytime soon, then we're cool.
I believe we're cool. I believe we're cool right now. We did a gig on the weekend, mate.
We did. It had been a couple of months. When was the last one we did? It was probably another one at the Hen, wasn't it?
Probably, yeah.
Maybe pre-October.
But it was good fun. It was a pretty good thing. Well, I had some good food.
What did you order?
Mate, and
Bergs?
I just had a burger. Yeah, they do a pretty good American-style cheeseburger there. But what I did want to talk about was, mate, the next generation coming in strong under your tutelage, mate.
Yeah, a couple of my students came down. That was cool. A couple of my guitar student and came down and jumped up, played some songs, sang some songs. So that was cool.
How old are those kids?
They are 15. Triplets.
15.
Yeah, they all play.
So
they're good, man. I went round to their place on Monday because they've got a gig next week, like a band competition thing. So they're writing some songs, but they're really good. Like, when you write I was going to say like your first band's songs for your first band, and it's like 3-chord pop punk songs. But then I was thinking like actually yours were like 3-chord Iron Maiden style songs, but same sort of same deal.
Foot to the floor.
Yeah, they've got a lot of chords with numbers. So that was cool. And like sections, it's not just like here's a block of 8 bars and then another block of 8 bars for the next part. Like there were bits in it and the lyrics were cool. So yeah, they're talented kids. It's nice.
Yeah, I had someone come for a lesson. I've known their parents for a long time, and this kid, Vinny, if you're listening to this, you're awesome. 15. First thing he plays when he comes in is Unchain the Night. I just go, all right, what else do you know how to play? And it was, Troy, it was just us. But like us at 18, but he's 15. Yep. So all about it. It's pretty awesome. But yeah, those kids that came down, man, like I know one of them got up, but
they all play, man. They're all really good.
They all play. For a 15-year-old boy to get up at a venue and not only play a song, but sing and play a song and do it very well was really, really awesome. You guys did Easy and Love Rears Its Ugly Head?
Yeah, they did Love Rears at a band like a school thing a few months ago and like kicked ass so bad. And they played it. I made them play it so many times over the last like 6 months. I was like, oh, this will be a good one. And it sort of works acoustic. I was surprised because he forgot some of the words and I was laughing because stupid kid. No, I don't mean that. He's cool.
Yeah. Just learn. If you're going to forget the words, forget all of them, mate. And just improv.
Yeah. I've told this story a few times to people. I might have mentioned it on here before, but like when I started doing covers, okay, do you remember the first gig that you and I did as a trio, like when I played bass and sang 4 sets it was, which was, like literally Ryan, like the singer from Leon's band, called me and said, oh, hey, I can't do this gig on Friday. It was a Monday. I can't do a gig on Friday. Do you want to do it? And I was like, well, I don't play bass and I don't sing, but let's just give it a shot. So
yes,
I did it because you have to always say yes. Like you say yes and you deal with the consequences. But anyway, I remember being super stressed out because you guys had a bunch of songs I'd never, I didn't know, like Bad Moon Rising, like just stuff I've done a million billion times now. But like your Bad Moon Risings, Holy Grails, and I had this book, like I printed out a bunch of lyrics and stuck him in a folder, so I could just flick through and read the lyrics as I played, and brought a music stand and everything. I think, this was pre having an iPad, and obviously I do all that on
the one time you've ever done this.
Well, I did it for a few months, like I think those early gigs with you. But anyway, I was just really worried about fucking up lyrics to songs. And then our buddy Anthony, he made this comment of like, "Oh, I've never learnt the lyrics to any song I've ever played in my whole life. So just make them up. Like no one will tell. Like the vocals, this is semi-true. If you're doing a gig like what we do, you don't know what it sounds like out the front because you're too busy playing the song. There's never a sound person there. So, you just kind of just do the gig. So who cares? And so I made the lyrics up to a million billion songs. And I just thought, well, who cares? Like, for example, the one that always sticks in my mind, it's not that funny, but like Lonely Boy, when Lonely Boy, everyone was playing that song. And I kind of knew the first verse because it was semi like easy to remember. And the second one I was like, man, I got no idea what's going on. So I used to go, well, I like burritos and it's plain to see. And I just sing the whole thing about food. That was cool.
It's the spirit of the blues, mate. I love it as well seeing
Spirit of the Blues.
Troy Naberband,
flows
Spirit
through
of
my
the
veins.
Blues.
Yeah.
Stallion, Story of the Cimarron, Story of the Blues, Troy Naberband. It's funny seeing videos by you see those obviously like Universal Audio sponsored things with like Rhett Shull, where it's like him and Tim Pierce doing something and it's him and someone else. And, they're these high production things where they're playing classic songs and, that's the world they're living in.
Yep.
And then for us, it's, mate, it's a 2-channel mixer and 1 speaker and you just get through the gig and eat a burger and a burrito and job well done.
How many
That's
times,
the real world.
Yeah. Like this gig, the one that I mentioned, like the first one that I did with Leon, because they had maybe a pair of powered speakers there and I think a little mixer. So the thing is like for the sound side, because I've been doing that so long, that's no problem. But then the playing, it's obviously a different skill and you have to kind of work out how to sing and play bass and that becomes a little bit stressful. But at least getting a sound, I can mostly make it loud enough and balance it to the best of how it probably can sound at that venue. But I remember there was a few gigs when either I feel like I didn't have a bass amp or you forgot to bring a bass amp. So it was just like bass to cable. I think it was a clip-on tuner. So bass, then a cable, then into the like line input on the mixer. And
no
that was,
preamp.
No preamp, no nothing.
Just raw dogging.
Just complete raw dogging it. And the thing is, man, we did that gig for 6 months after that. And we lost it because no one ever came down. Not because we sucked, but I sucked. But
we stopped doing the gig, but we didn't lose the gig.
Correct.
The gig lost us.
And then like even like the other day when we did that hen gig, I said to Leon right before, because we're talking about microphones and positioning, because I'll mention something in a second, but one of the golden rules of sound, right, is, well, not golden rules, but one of the things you consider when you do live sound is your PA speakers, your front of house speakers. They should be relatively high, because if they're low, then people stand in front of them and you can't hear the sound. So you generally keep them above head height, or at least the tweeters above head height, so you can hear clarity.
So tell people how I set the PA up for this gig.
Oh yeah, what did you use? So you had some FR guitar speakers, a pair, like a stereo pair of what are they, 10-inch speakers?
They're the Red Sound MF10. So they're like a guitar voiced FR, and we did a New Year's gig with everything direct and those, and we put them on stools at this mine site because we had to fly out, so take the minimum amount of stuff. It was like, why take speaker stands when no one cares, and we can just put them on stools instead? They're really, really great I really like them for running guitar through. They were actually pretty decent for that gig.
And they sounded good at the hen too. It was like they were they weren't on stands, they were on the stage, which was about a foot high. And
if that. Half a foot.
And we're playing outdoors to a grass area, and probably like, what would the pub, like undercover pub area is probably like 10 meters away from where we were playing. And you could hear everything fine. It was like, I don't know, man. It's so funny I don't think it's a gig like that gets enhanced by bringing more gear, more gear, B, more expensive gear. It's just you play to the environment. There are other situations that absolutely wouldn't work out, but in that one, obviously you've done that so many times.
Because everyone's seated, everyone's eating and drinking, and they're seating at those like park bench things, and then there's children running around on the grass area. It's a lovely gig. There's no TVs anywhere, so there's no like sport. There's no. How many gigs do you do where you're setting up and the UFC's on, and you're just like, this is going to be one of those nights.
Always.
There's
a gig
there's
I do
UFC
regularly.
fans there. There's telling you to not get in the way of UFC.
Yeah, there's a gig I do regularly with a TV, like a 72-inch, bigger. What was it, like 100-inch TV or something right above where I play. So I'm like,
about half what you normally rocking, big dog.
But yeah, I'm like, everyone's like really digging the band today. They keep watching, and then you hear a cheer, like you'll finish a guitar song, it's like, yeah!
Yep.
And it's, someone's kicked a goal in the soccer. So anyway, the point of the story, like don't care. That's not the point of the story. It's just that, like, if you can work with what you have and understand the situation that you're in, which we're there to enhance a vibe, right? We're not there to be the sole, like, people aren't necessarily coming to just watch the band. They want to just enjoy the vibe of the venue, and therefore it's actually not that difficult. Quickly, so two things to finish my story about the lyrics, because for years and years didn't give a shit about the lyrics to anything, and just made them up if I didn't know them. And it was all good. But I remember then our friend Anthony that mentioned, I've never liked the lyrics to anything. He moved to America many years ago, and when he came back, we did a gig together. And what does he do? But he rocks up to the gig with a music stand and a folder full of lyrics. And I'm like, what are you doing, man? Like, it's your fault that I don't do, like, that I've just developed this skill because you told me it was fine. Traitorous. It's like Leon going to Logic. It's just, I'm getting just insulted left, right, and center.
It's like the Roman emperors in Ravenna. For anyone who loves a bit of the Roman Empire. But yeah, that's quite shocking I once saw Anthony do a gig with Frank Salenza. So ex-Baby Animals drummer, plays drums in Ryan's Credence band, and, very, very well renowned. And they were doing what I assume was meant to be an acoustic duo at the Sail and Anchor. And
I think I was there. I think Anthony was together.
Yeah,
right?
Anthony was playing his gem.
Yep.
And Frank was playing, so Frank plays, traditional, right, like, hits the snare with the left hand, plays the hi-hat with the right hand over normal, every other drummer except Ian Pace and Chris Reeve kind of thing, right? And Frank had completely set his kit up left-handed, like the mirror image, and was playing the whole gig like that and with his left foot on the kick. So, and they were ripping it. But yeah, he also, did his thing where he was singing a song where he just making up the lyrics and not even singing words. But there's, probably two of the best musos you've ever seen. And they're just like, yeah, we're doing this gig. We may as well like practice. I remember Frank saying that, where it's just like, yeah, I'm bored. I'm going to like improve my dexterity on the drums. So I love the thought of, before you retire at 40, Troy, maybe you'll be doing gigs playing guitar left-handed.
When I was about 18, I probably spent about 2 days trying to learn how to play upside down.
Did you have this thing of like, this will make me better?
No, it was, I want to be like Michelangelo Badio. So if I can learn how to play stuff with this hand, like this hand will be fine. And if I could do stuff with this hand, then maybe I can like do some harmonized tapping and all this sort of stuff, which I sort of like, I guess your Stanley Jordan type of stuff.
Yep.
I can't do it, but there was probably like a week there when I had worked on it enough to be able to do something. So maybe I could like play chords with one hand and then improvise with the other hand. But nowadays, I don't know. I can't do guitar with one hand, so it's too bloody hard. But anyway, it doesn't matter. I was going to say, I'm going to give people a quick audio lesson because, there's one person.
Yeah, you were going to get it. We were building towards something here with microphones.
Yeah, and then we'll get to an actual proper topic of the day. But just quickly for everybody, just so you understand, because 19 years. This is my 19th year of doing audio. Because there's a person that has commented occasionally on the sound quality of these. It's just we do our best, but sometimes streaming the audio across the internet like this, you can have mixed results. So apologies when that does happen. But just a quick audio lesson for people, because I did mention to Uncle Leon before we started, because he had the mic out of shot, like a boom, like when you see it TV stuff. which is cool because it'll pick up the sound, but it's also kind of noisy and the tone of it will be different. So these are dynamic microphones, everybody. You know what a dynamic microphone is, Uncle Leon?
It has dinosaurs in it?
That's absolutely what it is. Now, it's got a little moving like coil and magnet on the inside of it. That's what picks up the sound. Well, that's what turns the sound energy into electricity.
A bit of a wiggly jiggly.
Long story short. Anyway, these dynamic microphones from up close on a source will sound pretty good, but further away they miss a lot of detail that you get from like a condenser microphone or something like that. So they just sound better and they sound quieter and all that when you're right on them. There's a few people I've seen that use these it's not just you, it's like a lot of people on YouTube. Like they have these dynamic mics, like an SM7, which is also very low gain, like very quiet microphone, really far away from them. And you can make it work because like you can use denoising and you can use EQ and stuff to make the mic sound okay.
Hey, bro, isotope. It's the only reason anything in this room sounds good.
Yeah, it's completely fine. Like it's not that it's not doable, but it's the way people mic with these mics sometimes is what you expect from like a shotgun mic, a small diaphragm condenser, but one that is very directional, like, the long looks like a shotgun. And that's because that's what we see on film and TV and stuff. They have an issue with like picking up ambient noise and stuff, but they're made to be mic'd a bit further away. But anyway, it's just we'll try this. Hopefully, I think when you talk directly into the front of the microphone, it always sounds better. Just from anybody that's out there that is of interest.
Will you do these ones? Yeah, look, Troy.
And also when you want to make a real serious point, you talk really close into the microphone like this and get the added proximity effect and it sounds sweet. So there you go. Anyway, quick audio lesson, everybody.
So there you go.
I started doing sound.
Get your Lyle from Psionic Audio voice on. Oh my God.
He's got the most beautiful sounding voice on podcasts or live streams or whatever. Oh my God, it's just amazing. And so I've been listening to those Sunset Sound roundtables. I just watched the Lee Sklar one, and the host from that too, just this like rich, beautiful, silky voice. I think he's talking into a U-47 FET, I believe, which probably is why. Anyway, that's not what people are here to talk about, Uncle Leon. They want to hear about guitar gear. So
and they want to hear about rectifiers, Troy, because that's what we're going to talk about today.
Rectifiers.
Exactly. Today, just get some sun. We're going to shine a light on the Recto and maybe some other just kind of post-80s high-gain things, because it's kind of like there's two big dogs, really, isn't there, when it comes to like the sound of high-gain guitar after about 1992, right? And you've got them right there in shot. One's pink, one is not so pink. The dual rectifier and the 5150. Like, would you argue when it comes to the world we often inhabit of high gain, they're maybe they're like the two greatest amps to come out in the last 30 years, if you consider, let's think about this.
Oh, yeah.
The electric guitar comes out. You got the Bassman. You got the Twin. You got the JTM 45, which is kind of a bass one, but then you got the Plexi, the 2203, the AC30, like really, the Ampeg SVT for the low enders out there. They're the ones that like wrote the book, right? They're the stone cold classic sound of electric guitar things. And then you got a bunch of modding those things. So you go down the modding Fenders and you get the Mark series, you go down the modding Marshalls and you get like everything else. But there's a kind of like an inflection point most people would consider, which is the Soldano SLO. So like Mike Soldano, and check it out, everybody. Soldano Astro. I've done some videos with that. I lent it to a buddy for a couple of days recently and he loved it. And I got it back to make some more videos with. And you can probably just see my hot rod there as well. It's like, I like that sound.
Oh yeah, I do
lot.
see that. Yep.
Yeah. So I don't want to. It would be amazing to get Mike Soldano on this show, but Mike Torin has an amazing interview with him. So shout out to Michael Torin. Go and check out his channel because there's a great interview with Mike Soldano, kind of focusing on the rack stuff he did. But I digress. It all comes from, this. It's like the hot rod car culture thing. Like you just kind of keep making things more efficient and you give them more gain. But by the time you get to say when did the 5150 come out? 92, 93?
I think it was 92.
Yeah,
likely.
like 1992 is this pretty big inflection point, it seems, where like the first 5150 comes out, obviously it's the Eddie Van Halen amp, and he was using an SLO for a little while, apparently after his main Marshall died, but designed to do Eddie things. But lots of people kind of cottoned on that, like, hey, this thing has so much going on that you can do that's not Van Halen. And then you've also got the dual rectifier come out, which, the preamp is an SLO preamp, but the power amp's a very different design. There's loads of different revisions with it. Those two things, by the time you're getting to like 99, 2000, they're just on everything. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Is this your feeling with it, where it's like these two? When I started playing, I feel like the dual rectifier was, if you get it, like, bro, you like Marshalls, just the best amps are messes. Like, once you can spend $5,000 on an amp, that's what you're going to do. You're going to get one of these. And of course, it's Australia, the dollar's crap. And yeah, we're literally spending $5,000 on a dual rec. And then the cabinets even more. And then the 5150s as well were, I don't remember being personally as into them, but I knew they were used on, so we're talking 2004, 2005. It was like metalcore had entered, and everything was a tube screamer into a 5150 in drop C, EMGs. It was just like such an extra level of intensity that I kind of wasn't used to and basically wasn't ready for. It's the kill switch engage sound, right?
Yeah. I mean, like, arguably until about like 2010, those were the only two sounds going around, right? Like, of heavy stuff. Even think about the what was it, like the stuff that we were listening to in like 2008, like all those Frontiers,
all that Magnus Carlsen stuff.
But like, and all that associated music, it wasn't like directly a Marshall sort of thing that people wanted. It wasn't until, like, I guess your Free Mini type thing came along a couple of years afterwards that it added a different flavor into the equation. But I think it wasn't a sound that at that time I liked as much, kind of like what you're saying, because I remember trying Rectos and just not really working. I just couldn't work it out. And the manual also I found really confusing back then, and the way people spoke about how it's like an interactive EQ, and when you do this, it does that. I was like, well, how are you fucking supposed to learn how to use it? It doesn't make any sense. It all seemed really confusing to me. So yeah, like the Recto thing, I associated it so much with nu metal. So I thought, well,
it's Linkin Park to me.
Yeah.
Like, it's hybrid theory. The sound of that album to me is like PRS Recto.
Yep.
Why would anyone ever want to use that sound?
Yeah. And and it's funny because I will talk about it, but like, I feel like I'm starting to understand it a bit better for, like, if I just think of it as a guitar amp. If I start to think of everything as just a tool and not like a tool to only do one purpose, it's actually very good and very versatile.
So this is a good point, right? Because probably for us growing up, it wasn't that it was just another amp. It was a recto, kind of mythologized, right? Well, you get a dual rectifier and it's just this different thing, right? And before we sort of talk about a little bit of a brief overview of the history of these things, can you remember the first time you played through one, and what was your impression?
Yeah, I reckon there was, in 2008, I borrowed one. My sister worked for she was in high school. Oh, was she in high school? She might have just finished high school, but she was working at this place that was like, they hired amps and did a little bit of PA and lighting and stuff. But yeah, they had some backline there as well. So I would drop her off on like a Saturday morning, and I completely forgot she worked there, but I'm gonna have to remind her because she's a doctor now. It's just like wild that she was doing that at like 17. But I remember dropping her off for work, and they were just like, "Oh, this Recto isn't doing anything. Like, why don't you take it for the week?" I'm like, "Yeah, fuck yeah." I took it home. I was full on into rack stuff at that time, so I didn't really get how to dial it in. I found it kind of confusing, but what I did really like about it is it made for an amazing power amp for my 88 MP1. That's the main thing I took away from it. But then years later, not that many years later, two years later, Anthony, who we just mentioned, he had the Road King, I think the Road King 2 maybe, And
I remember those, yeah.
Yeah, and that was like such a beast. Like it's basically a dual rectifier, but you got more tubes and like it's got like EL34s in it and 6L6s, and you can have either or, I think. You can't, surely you can't blend them. That wouldn't make any sense.
You probably can on something like a Road King.
No,
because simul class, right? That's That's a Boogie thing. I think the Mark 3 maybe.
Right. Well, anyway.
You could do that if you wanted to do it.
Yeah, so for some reason, I feel like there was a setting that was like you could run 4 6L6s and 2 EL34s. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But I remember having a band rehearsal at the studio and just using that amp because it was there. And I just couldn't get a fucking sound out of it, man. Like, let alone using it for sessions. Like, I really struggled for that. But standing in front of it, it felt so unintuitive because I had the bass on 0. And it sort of started sounding okay, like when it was maybe like on 1 or whatever. It was like really low. And also around the time, friends of the channel, Chaos Divine, like they'd gone into the studio to record one of their albums, and I went in and helped them out a little bit to get some guitar sounds and stuff. And I think one of the guitar players had a Recto. And I was like playing with it then. I was like, man, I can't really make it work. And the thing that really confused me is makes so much sense now, but I just never understood at the time why you would put a distortion pedal in front of an amp, which is realistically, tube screamer, not a distortion pedal as we think of it. But I was like, why would you have an amp that sucks and you can only make it work by putting something to make it suck less? Like, that just doesn't make any fucking sense to me. So anyway, that was my first intro to Rectos. But what about you?
I was obviously always aware of them, and I want to say, I reckon maybe the first time I actually got to properly play through one was when we tracked the very first Ragdoll EP. Mm-hmm. Again, Anthony was recording it, and when I did guitars, he was like, let's just use the Road King. And I'd done some of the guides with my Soldano hot rod. Mm-hmm. So here's the tie-in. When I first started going to gigs, so 2007, 2008, I'd been introduced to some people that we know, and I'd go down to the Paddo and see Dr. Feelgood play. Mm-hmm. And cover band Brian was in there, our buddy Tony on lead guitar, our buddy Umi on guitar, who knows Anthony. And he was playing through that amp, that Soldano Hot Rod 50, which belonged to another friend of ours, friend of the channel, not Nick Delena, Nick Rossetti. Sometimes interchangeable, very, very different men. Shout out to the Nicks. And I was like, there's a dude playing a Soldano, like what's going on? Mm-hmm. And I got talking to him and he's like, oh, hey man, yeah. So like I really like Richie Kotzen. I was like, who is this dude? What's going on? Little did I know I was getting introduced to the entire universe of all these people we ended up spending so much time around. So he goes, oh yeah, it belongs to my buddy Nick. I'm just borrowing it, but I think he's selling it. I normally I've got a dual rectifier. And I was like, why would you want to play a dual rectifier when you can have that Soldano? So anyway, I ended up buying the Soldano. And then, a few years later, recording down at Crank Recording with Anthony using his Road King that you were just talking about. Yeah, Recto Road King. And kind of not loving the sound. Mm-hmm. I just wasn't used to it, and it was really hard to play. And I basically just let him dial it in. He was like, trust me, it'll work. It'll work in the mix. And it was fine. Actually, that EP is still up on Spotify. If you look up Ragdoll Rock from 2011, you can hear the Road King on those. Mm. And I never loved those sounds that we pulled on there. It was always a point of like, it's the first thing we did, whatever.
Yep.
And then, of course, a few years later, Troy, you bought your Marshall, and then we retracked all those guitars. I was 1,000 times happier with it. Probably because I'd actually learned to play the songs by that stage and I had some experience under my belt. But I digress. Using the Road King was probably my first experience. Didn't love it. I used a triple rectifier as a backline amp in 2014 on tour. Mm-hmm. We got to play this gig and they had house backline, and this guy's like, oh, dude, there's a triple recto on a Boogie 4x12, like, go for it. So I just plugged my pedal board in. Now, it's funny because at the time I was gigging with one of those 6505 112 combos that were like dirt cheap in the States. Sounded great. So I was kind of, 6505, that's kind of Soldano-y. I'll buy one of those, use that for years, love that little thing. Oh, cool. I've heard the Rectos kind of have something to do with the 5150 and the Soldano. I'll plug in. Hated it. Like one of the least enjoyable backline experiences I've ever had. It was like, the thing was if I was playing the PV or I was playing a Soldano or a Marshall, there's this kind of like
immediacy,
chewiness to the sound, and like it's forgiving, and you can just playing the rectifier. I wasn't ready for just the transient response is different. The distortion texture is different. It was really, really difficult. So I was like, this sucks. But then this is the pivot point with the Recto. Shout out to our buddy Nigel, who I believe let you borrow his Roadster.
Yeah.
So not a Road King, a Roadster. It's like slightly more pimped out than a standard rectifier, but not as pimped out as a Road King.
Yep.
And we recorded a single in 2015, Rewind Your Mind. You did it. We did it at Crank. And I remember you saying to me, hey, like come into the studio, a few days before, and we'll set up some amps, and we'll just kind of like, we'll play a few amps in the room really loud through a cab, and we'll see what we like. And we tried a few things, and I remember, we were both playing through that, and it was kind of like a light bulb moment where I want to say in that moment, whatever you did, I got the sound, and I was like, this is kind of awesome. I really, really like this sound.
I think too, because you guys started like exclusively playing in drop D. And
drop C.
Or drop C, sorry. And it was like heavy, riffy. It just worked so well for that. Like the spongy, you don't need, everything isn't about the lead guitar sound all of a sudden. It's about like how big do the riff sound. And so that worked really well.
We went all in on trying to sound, like it's the first thing that I think properly sounded like, that's the ragdoll sound now. That was from that session. And then, tracking it. And I just remember loving it and going, man, this amp is amazing. I need to buy one. Rewind your mind, it's easy. You make hell for yourself trying to please me. Rewind your mind completely. And to me, I didn't know the difference between a Road King and a Roadster and a Revision G and a multi-watt. I was just like, I need a dual rectifier. Like, I just need to buy one. So I think the next week I just looked on Marketplace, and there was someone who had, he had two for sale. And it turns out one was the Rev G that, spoiler, I ended up buying, and then we used to track all of Back to Zero the next year. And another one was a multi-watt. And it was like, I want to sell, it was kind of like, I need to sell one of these amps, come and try them. And I got to this guy's house, and the first one that I plugged into was the Revision G. And I was like, yeah, sounds awesome. I'll take it. He's like, oh, you don't want to try the other one? I was like, no, I want this one. And that's the amp.
Because this is all before Leon became Mr. Fractal. And this is
2015.
Yeah. So, there's pictures of that experience in the studio of us in the live room, like cranking amps, because we had a bunch of stuff there. Yep. And there's also one from the Back to Zero session where there was like,
all the amps.
Yeah, like 12 heads in like stacked up, which nowadays, because I've got to list stuff, it's kind of less, it matters to me less. But at the time, we'd borrowed so much stuff, and, you and I had started to, you've always had a really cool collection of gear, but I started to collect a bit more bits and pieces. And it was pretty fun to go through all that. The Roadster, we used it for, did we boost and stuff with that? I think
that was definitely like either a tube screen or probably that Anarchy Audio Clon into it. Yeah. I feel like it was sort of like, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to boost high gain amps. Like we finally figured out what,
everyone else
Flames were doing in the mid 90s is a good idea to do in 2015.
It's just so stupid, man. Like, it's actually not that stupid. I don't want to like belittle us so much, because you don't understand sometimes like other people's lived experience and how like second nature things become. Like I said, listening to this, the Sunset Sound roundtable thing, like there's stuff that Lee Sklar's talking about how they record albums and some of the artists, and it's just that's just like life. That's how you like. He was there's a part where he talks about recording in the studio and hating baffles and all this sort of bits and pieces, and like. That makes so much sense to get that sound and why things are just, or like the way the band's always all playing together and stuff, and why it feels so organic and da-da-da. It's like, it's second nature to that generation of players,
Yes.
For us, there's like elements of like rack gear and putting like doing that, which is, it feels like, well, yeah, of course, like if you want to get that, I don't know, pick an ADA artist, like that Vito Brata sort of thing. Or you like the way to put those rigs together, because we like lived it or tried to live it at a very young age. We didn't quite have all the money for it. But yeah, we just don't think
we cosplayed it. We cosplayed that era. Like, you know,
totally did.
It's never coming back. And it's never coming back, kids. I hate to break it to you. That's just never coming back. Rack gear is fun. I like collecting it. The nostalgia is nice, but just don't buy an 88 MP1 for $1,000. Like,
yeah, that's silly.
You know, buy yourself a nice dinner and a bunch of plugins and go and make some music. Yeah. But, you know,
but yeah, like
it's
that sort of stuff, time. Guitar, like playing certain styles of music, it's like, it's so second nature to some people. And for us, like it takes a while to come around to it. So yeah, I don't think we had this like immediate realization of like, well, we've reinvented the wheel. We've changed the world, but it's like, got it right. Here's like the whiteboard with a bunch of squares on it and things that we need to learn, and we can like tick one off the list. Yeah. And there's only like 600 squares left now, but at least there's maybe 4 or 5 that have been kind of like ticked off. And yeah, anyway, it's just funny, man. It's like now getting that and now applying that to other amps and thinking about it. Like when I listen to certain sounds, I go like, all right, do I hear that boosted thing? Does it feel like it's just the amp? You know, you can dial it around your brain. So
a very quick digression for anyone listening to this who might be thinking, why would you use an overdrive in front of an amp that already has gain? And if someone had explained this to me years ago, I might have got it. I might have just been like, yeah, whatever, bro. But really what you're doing is you're altering the frequency response going into the amp. Mm-hmm. So the classic example is a tube screamer, right? And look, a lot of amplifiers allow you to do this. They have various gain stages and they have filtering in between the gain stages. So you turn the drive on a tube screamer down, you know, you move the tone control around, you're creating a filter. So, you know, you're also hitting the front of the amp harder, but a high gain amp's already saturating. You're not going to you're not really boosting the overall output volume. You're changing the amount of saturation or gain or distortion, but you're also often cutting out low end, which is going to make the guitar sound muddy. You're kind of pushing more mid-range, and you might be rolling off some high end. It might be more of an open sounding kind of thing, but you are changing what's coming out of the pickups and hitting the front of the amp. And like, it's, again, the analogies with a lot of other things, you know, it's kind of like cooking. It's like, that overdrive pedal is like getting a really nice sear on a steak. Like, you know, you cook it really, really hot going in, and then you bring it down. You get that crust, but you don't make it crusty all the way through. So yeah, doing that with a rectifier, which has a lot of low end going on, you know, it can really, really help. It gets you it's more than the sum of the parts.
Yeah. And then, because when did I get that tight drive? Was that 2012?
Hey, this is a great tie-in with the 5150 as well, because the Amp Tweaker tight drive, I feel like you bought that in 2012 in the States.
I did. I got it for like $100 because Doug Pinnick, who I love, because we all know how much I love King's X, but he did a demo video for it because, he just did. I don't know why. And he wrote a really cool song and a riff for it as a part of the advertisement, which I love, and I used to get it stuck in my head. But I found one secondhand in like a Guitar Center in Nashville, so I bought it. But that's got a variable high pass filter on it, so yeah, you can tighten up the low end. Whereas like a tube screamer, you know, a lot of people understand how this works. When you use a tube screamer, it rolls off the bottom end and it gives you a bit of a like bump in the mid range. The tight drive, just variably, you can just turn the knob and then the bottom end disappears a bit. So yeah, if you're using an amp like a rectifier, for me, I had the bass on like nothing. On the Road King to make it feel the way I wanted it to feel. It's like, well, I can do that with a pedal. But what's important is, as you mentioned, like where you place this filtering in the signal chain. If you've got so much lower, like Jason Headfirst, a lot of his videos when he talks about modding Marshalls, it's about reducing the bottom end going into the preamp section, because if you've got so much bass hitting the front of an amp, it flubs up and it doesn't sound tight. So if your bass control in your amp is at the like after the preamp section, so you can't remove the like boominess and distortion, boomy, sludgy distortion from the front of the preamp by using the bass control. It has to be done beforehand. So, I mean, lighter pickups, not lighter, pickups that are not as bassy will have that effect as well. Pedals are probably easier than continually like unsoldering pedals. So
the other thing as well is if you think about on some amps the way the bass control works, and then if you are carving out bass with a pedal, it's kind of like in the synth world, right? Where like say subtractive synthesis, it's you just make tones and then you filter them, but then having a resonant filter can be part of the sound. Like you sweep that resonant filter, and you know it's part of the sound of different classic synths, and they have sort of like different, you know, different slopes and all sorts of different stuff going on. It's sort of like having a pedal that cuts bass and then having an amp that boosts bass. You can kind of create this like resonant, you can like change that peak on there, and that itself can have a sound. And like, you know, think of the classic sound of different pickups as well. Like pickups, you know, they roll off high end, basically. They're also kind of filters, but where the high end starts to roll off, there's a little knee in there. So, and where that is can really kind of determine, you know, how a particular pickup in a particular guitar works with a particular amp. So yeah, I often think of that where it's like, it's not, and because this is non-linear stuff and it's distorting, there's that extra factor in there where it's part of the fun. Like, do you want the amp straight in? Do you want a pedal in front of it? Do you want something happening in post? It's very, very fun. But that amp tweaker tight drive, that tight control was so important. Now, that amp tweaker, all the designs are done by James Brown, who is the engineer who designed the 5150 with Eddie Van Halen. And rather than rehash all of that, go and watch the Tone Talk with James Brown. It's amazing. He seems like such a wicked dude. But we'll get to the 5150 thing in a second. With the rectifier, like all good mythological pieces of gear, right? There's multiple revisions. So there's actually a website called rectifiedguide.com, which is sort of amalgamated all this information, where basically they were saying the first prototypes for the dual rectifier was, let me see, I think 89 to 91. So they were built into Mark IV chassis. And this is, you know, this is still like the hair metal era. More gain is more good. But the first actual revision that came out, so it came out in February 92. And the list price was 1,195 American dollars. And this is the one with the kind of silvery chrome panel, black knobs, and then the black hammered out, you know, the tread plate look on there, right?
So what revision did you say that is?
So that's revision C. So apparently that's the first 280 odd amps made.
And yeah, I'm not sure if you'll talk about this at the very end, but like interestingly, Umi that we mentioned before, who was playing the Soldano, but Leon, he did have a rectifier. So that amp, that like Umi's rectifier lived at the studio for like a couple of years, and he sold it a couple of years ago. It's one of my big gear regrets that I didn't buy it. Because it sounded really, really good, and it sounded really different to other rectifiers. Everyone commented on that. I said I didn't have the money at the time to buy it, and I really regret it. Having watched some videos and stuff, like mostly fluff videos, so I think this website might be his Recto guide.
Oh, right. Interesting.
It might be, but I can't remember which one it is. But I have a feeling Umi's was like a Rev C because he bought it in America in like 2004 and brought it back to WA and had it all like converted to 240.
And looking at the photos of this, it looks like his amp.
Yeah.
I always remember thinking, man, that's really weird. His amp doesn't look like a normal Recto. What's going on? So basically, revision C, revision D, and revision E, they're the first 600 and something amps. And that's still 92. And then this reckons serial 643 to the 3000s were revision Fs. And these look more like what you expect a rectifier to look like. They have the chrome tread plate thing, and they've got the black backdrop for the knobs with the chrome knobs on there. So if anyone's ever seen a Recto, it's basically what they look like. Now, these were 2-channel rectifiers as well. So you had it could either be orange or green, right? So you could have as a clean channel, and then there's this like vintage mode, which I guess is kind of more a classic crunch sort of thing, or you can clone the red channel onto the orange channel. It doesn't sound exactly the same as the red channel. This is like the beauty of these things, you know? It's not just like, but it's a cool idea where you can have both channels if you want on that like modern high gain setting. And yeah, so that's the Revision F. Now, my personal one that I have, the serial number is a Revision G serial number, but it has the Revision F cosmetics. And my understanding is, so mine is an Australian export model, basically. So I think for the export models, the kind of, what I've read about anyway with the Rectos is that, yeah, they still use the small logo and the old faceplates for the Revision G exports, but they changed over to what you consider like the standard classic, the Rev G, 2 channels. It's got the bigger Mesa logo on it, 2 channels. And this is like 94 to 99 they made these. So this is probably like, if you played a Mesa in that time, you probably played one of these.
But that's just cosmetic. It's not like in like internally there's no differences between the
I think
F and
there
G?
were some, each of these revisions, the circuit did change very, very slightly, and different things with the transformers. I think the Revision F, they added the parallel loop.
Oh, okay.
Which is an easy mod if you want it changed over. And that's right. You also had, they were using the old Boogie Mark III output transformers up until around the like 1300-ish serial number. So different transformers, a few different things. They also came out with the rack mount rectifier. There's a John Sykes rig rundown from 92, 93, where he's got a rectifier, as people like to call it. He's like all in on that. Apparently George Lynch had I know he toured with a Recto for a while. Apparently his was like a Rev C, which would be more...
Yeah, because I think
more like a Soldano.
I think
basically.
I watched a video, or someone was talking. It might have been Fluff. It might have been someone saying like the original Rectos were like a hair metal sort of an amp. That's why they had so much gain on them, and they just evolved because that music became super lame to people. So, you know, like that wouldn't be surprising. George likes to play the bougie gear, right? So at the time, it
all of the bougie gear. A true gas addict. And yeah, look, we haven't even talked about some of the specifics of these, right? Like the things, and most people would know that the preamp of a rectifier, the high gain mode, it's an SLO. Like Mike Soldano has many times said, you know, he looked at that and just went, you know, this is one of those like don't copy your friend's homework kind of thing. But the power amp section is very different. One big aspect of that sound is there's no negative feedback on the modern high gain mode. So the amp's really sensitive to the type of load you connect to it. So connecting it to different cabinets, you know, I definitely played mine through a bunch of different cabs, and like playing it through an oversized Boogie 4x12 is like, it's a thing. It's so different to playing it through a Marshall 4x12 or through a 2x12 or various other things. Like it very much changes the way the power amp sounds and responds. But then you've got the kind of classics. So you have switches on the back. One is called Bold and Spongy. So you can, it's kind of like a Variac-ish kind of thing where you can have a tighter response or a really spongy, squishy response. And then it's called a dual rectifier because you can have tube rectification or you can have solid state rectification. Again, it changes up the feel a little bit. Like for you, where do you set those things on your Recto?
Let me tell you, because I can't remember.
And the other thing as well, after 99, they came out with a 3-channel Recto as well. And then there's various things with that. And you have the power scaling on them and stuff like that.
Sorry, I'm going to get up and have a look because I can't remember where I said it last time, but I like where it's at the moment.
So yeah, basically, Soldano SLO preamp heavily influenced that. And then the spin-off with the 5150 is that Soldano, Eddie was using a Soldano, and it's kind of based on that design as well. So that's why I've been mentioning Soldano and why I've been mentioning the 5150s. Troy's just getting in there, having a look at it, and he's going to tell us where he's got these set. While he's not listening, I'm going to say for me...
bold silicon diodes.
Yes. There you go. I do like the tube rectification on there sometimes. It's a different feel, but the spongy mode... I'd never really got on with, unless you're going for like a vintage thing. Troy, what are you doing, mate?
Headphones, mate. Sorry.
You're just going to have to one ear it.
This is the worst thing I ever bought in my life. I'm not going to say what brand these earphones are. but I know you have some as well. They cost a significant amount of money, and they fall apart continuously, even when I tape them together. So
they may or may not be an Australian company.
Yeah, I'll move on from that. But they sound pretty good, but far out, they are unreliable. Yeah, Recto, currently in bold silicon diode mode, but I changed it up a little bit.
That's where I like it for the chugga, like boost it, have those on there. I remember, the guy who services my amps, old Graham, who I actually got in touch with, he's still kicking, he's still doing well. I got to go visit him. And basically, my Recto had a bunch of issues. Like, you needed to have the foot switch plugged into the foot switch jack for it to work. And basically what was happening was, when that wasn't in there, it was shorting out the power supply that controls the switching system and the power to V1. So the amp's on, but there's no sound. So he was like, this is a bad design. I fixed it for you. And then he said, mate, this switch on there that says bold or spongy, he's like, when you put it on spongy, that's really bad for the amp. Why would anyone ever use that? And I was like, yeah, it's a bit of a sound. He's like, don't do it. So I just don't. And the thing I'll change the most is like, tube or silicon rectification.
It was Jason's live stream that with Dave Friedman and Bruce Egnator, like they talk about the Rectos a bit. In fact, like the Rectos do come up a bit in some of those, in the technical amp nerd live streams and videos and stuff, which is really interesting because everyone appears that everybody hates them because they are so complicated on the inside, which is, I don't think the reason why people hate them, it's just that like design wise, they do some very odd things. Like mute circuits and whatnot, I believe has come up a few times I don't know the specifics of these things. I won't say it's good or bad, but just odd ways of getting it to work. The thing is, like, they do sound a certain way, so it's like I can't hate on them as a user. I can only hate on them so much. Mine has been, I'm not going to say it's bulletproof because I did get it retubed recently. So, but also I don't know if it had ever had that done in its entire life, and it's probably 20 years old or something now. So it was bound to happen sooner or later. But yeah, as a tool, like all these things are, it's super awesome and usable. It does something that like a Marshall won't do and a Vox won't do. It's like, it's its own sound and its own thing.
So what are the modes on the 3-channel? Because basically the 2-channel is, you have like the red channel, that's normally your modern sound, but you can have that as like modern or vintage. Then there is a clean mode, but normally most people don't even bother with that. It's sort of like, it's basically like Recto vintage, which is, I don't know, to me, it almost kind of sounds like a higher gain tweed sort of sound. Like it's very farty and flubby, and it's kind of cool. Like you plug a telly into it, but then it's the high gain sound. That's what everyone wants. But on the 3 channels, there's like the raw mode and a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, raw and modern is pretty much, I think that's what it is.
Now I remember the raw sounding like really, really good for like a crunch style thing, right?
Yeah, hang on. One more time. I'll get up. I'm going to hold this earpiece together as well so I don't...
Yep.
What have I got set at the moment? I think I've got...
So while we're taking a look as well... So
raw, vintage, modern. I was getting vintage and raw mixed up. I've got channel 2 currently set to vintage and channel 3 set to modern. Is that what I said? Modern. Yeah. The raw one, I think I didn't like that one as much recently. There's a gain difference between the channels as well, so it's not like you can just like flick the switch and then it all changes. Like you've got to readjust your volume settings, which is just, that's fine. Like, I mean, the Jose mod stuff in Marshalls is the same, right? So yeah, I struggle with that amp a bit because, okay, firstly, with anything Mesa Boogie, just read the manual. You have to read a manual. Like, it makes the biggest like difference in the world because things are labeled weirdly. So I believe in like, and just to continue on that train of thought for 1 second, like in the modern mode, right? And I said I have that on the channel 3, the red channel. Like in that mode, the presence control isn't like, because present, that's negative feedback, right?
Well, the presence
on a normal
interacts with the negative feedback. Yeah,
right.
Normally, yeah.
Normally, yeah. So I believe
when you have negative feedback, the presence control is a presence control. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe in like the modern mode on that Recto, it doesn't work like that sort of presence control. It's actually like a low pass filter, so it's just like when it's all the way off, it's a low pass filter means that it's just wiping all the top end off the amp. And as you increase the presence control, what you're doing is actually taking the frequency of the low pass filter up higher and higher and higher till it doesn't do anything anymore, I believe.
You get more of that signature frying bacon sizzle.
Yeah, but that's just the labeling of it makes sense, because as you turn the presence control up on a traditional amp that has presence, it's going to increase like the higher end frequencies as you do it. Like it's doing the same thing. It's just doing it in a slightly different way, like technically in a different way. But again, all that's in the manual, which helps to read. Like there are certain things where once I've read it and I can understand how something is supposed to work, I can do the thing it's supposed to do. Yep. Sometimes I do struggle. Like it's really stupid. Like I struggle to twist the knobs into the position where I like the sound of it the most. That's not exclusively the case, but it helps. Like I'm looking at this Timmy pedal at the moment. What's the thing on that one? There's like the knobs are backwards on that thing.
Yeah, so they're, as you turn them up, they're actually cutting frequencies.
Which you're gonna hear that, obviously. That's a bad example, but yeah. Anyway, like long story short, I'm interested about how these things work, so I like to look at the knobs. But yeah, the way I've got this, I've struggled with the tone, getting a tone I liked. So what I did not that long ago was I watched a couple of videos with people and how they dialed the amps in, and specifically on the 3-channel, because like the 3-channel is different sounding to the early ones and the multi-watts, like it's its own thing. So I was like, all right, well, it's not an uncommon amp. And I know people hate on them a bit, but it's still like a really great amp. So I just kind of sat there, and I didn't like I looked at some of the knob settings. I was like, just as a reference point. And then I just by ear was like kind of move stuff around a little bit, a few millimeters at a time, because the knobs on them are super sensitive.
Yep.
And I got them dialed into a place that was actually really satisfying. And I still move from there. Don't get me wrong. I'm not like, it's not a set and forget sort of thing. But that's kind of how I settled on like having the vintage mode on one and the raw mode on the other. It just kind of works. Like it's weird because with this amp, like if you go on forums or hear people discuss it, I've seen people say like, oh, well, again, like assumed knowledge or whatever, like just the understanding of it. Some people were like, well, obviously you only use the red channel modern setting for your riffage, and then you use your vintage sound for your lead stuff because it's like a different sort of character, which that feels backwards because the modern is gainier sounding. So you'd think like, well, that's going to have a lot more searing sort of high end sort of thing. But well, in fact, like it does sound really good for rhythm guitar. And like the fact that you get a bit more mids and a bit more like, I don't know, I don't really know what word to describe it, but
it's like, these are all cases of best practice, right? It's like, oh, well, this is just the best practice for this particular piece of gear.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it is. To me, it's only ever been something I've used as like a chugga rhythm amp.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like you're doing a lot more recording with it where you're doing more than just sludgy drop C riffs. So
yeah, well, I could use
you recorded something recently where it sounded awesome. And I was like, oh yeah, that's definitely, it's still like the Recto sound. It's just not as much gain.
Well, because I moved all this stuff around at the end of last year. This rack here with the peak, the Recto and the 5150 and stuff is currently wired in. The other rack is not, and that's because I only recently got the second rack, so I don't have the cables and stuff for it yet. I have to go and make some. And doing the session, because it was all set up, like I'd plugged those amps in. The height of these shelves is in such a way whereby like the second shelf down doesn't fit all the amps, but one of them needs to be slightly small enough to get like 5 amps, and it's really stupid. But anyway, what was plugged in at the time, and I think something was weird with the cherry tone. Something was going on with that. So the matchless clone, I tried to use that, but there was like this weird like little harmonic going on, and I kind of had to bail on that.
Yeah, right.
And I was like, the song didn't really need a Marshall, and it didn't need a Splawn, and at 5150 felt too heavy. So I thought, well, like the Recto's like got 3 channels, like surely that's gonna have something that's gonna work. And yeah, it did. It was awesome. I used it with the Timmy pedal because I'm borrowing that off a friend of the channel, Chris, and used that for this entire track with my Charvel. So it was like, it was a pretty simple process. And then you do a session like that and you go, why do I have all this shit when I can do everything with one amp and one guitar? That's pretty dumb. And one guitar.
That's funny.
But the thing is, I used every channel of it, like the clean. I used the clean on it, and the clean was awesome. I used it with the Strymon Mobius and the something else, the El Capistan maybe, for a bit of, effect. I used the channel 3 for all the high stuff, but yeah, all the rhythms were just Timmy into the vintage, and it was great. Like it worked. It wasn't.
Yeah, I feel like that's something that, like a 5150 or an SLO, I'm sure they can probably do them, but they're just like not renowned for doing that sound. Like there's something in, especially the 3-channel Rectos on that vintage mode where they're pretty good pedal platforms. And, they're also like the vintage mode, if you hit it with like a fuzz pedal, it's a great amp for like doom or like stoner stuff. They're actually super versatile. And I feel like there's something in that the gain structure is different enough where like a Soldano or a 5150, to me, they build on that, the Plexi everyone loves, right? Mm-hmm. It's the Marshall 1959 lead model, right? Mm-hmm. Like it goes all the way, there's something in that where they're like, yeah, these are terms that don't really apply anymore, but they kind of used to mean something where it's like, yeah, this is for lead guitar. This is for loud single note soloing so that you can hear the soloist. And, to me, the best example of that's like Richie Blackmore, someone who hated playing rhythm guitar, loved playing solos. Hear the 200-watt Marshall Majors, ridiculous amps. But like the 5150, it's Eddie Van Halen's amp. Like, everyone's favorite lead guitar player, like the embodiment of the lead guitar player in a band, even though, hey, Eddie's rhythm playing is really where the party's at, but I digress. The Soldano as well, it's this thing for high gain lead playing, and there's this sort of like, there's this character that you always know they're there, whereas I feel like with the Recto, it diverges enough from that where you're like, yeah, if you just want to like track rhythm guitars for a pop punk song, it works really, really good.
Yeah.
If you want to, it can do the lead guitar thing as well, obviously, but yeah, you can change the gain structure enough from the sort of tight, filtered, high gain thing that the Soldano and the 5150 do, where I see people write off the dual rectifier as like, oh, it's just an SLO, but not as good. You're like, well, that's missing the whole point, bro.
Yeah, to piggyback on what you said, it's like it's not a bland character, but you can make it disappear in something, which I think is an odd concept for some people, but sometimes, like I mentioned when we do these gigs, right, we're there to create a vibe. We're not there to be like the star of the show. And a lot of there's a lot of situations whereby you just need to make something sound big or fill the space and not have your ear just be so taken by the guitar sound. Because a lot of like for music that isn't for guitar players, pop song or just a normal rock song,
the majority of music.
Yeah. And I like, man, like, like we both love guitar sounds and guitar amps and guitar players and guitar music and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, there's a huge part of music where it's just got to be part of the song. And I think that works really well. And there's a lot of, it also gets me.
Hey, and that kind of fits the new metal aesthetic, right? Which was like, who cares about solos? It's all about the vibe and like
the chugga chugga and the
chugga chugga and the groove and the weight of the sound. Where it's like, whether it's Linkin Park or Limp Bizkit or Creed or something, it's like that was an era where whether they were all song focused or people were just paying lip service to it, but it's like that amp is there at that time.
But I was going to say, it's like I'm not really being a pedal guy ever, because I just think amps are cooler, and the way that I play when I play a dirty amp is just way more satisfying and reacts I can react to it way differently. But I can't, if I think about certain pedal sounds as being like giving just the general idea of distortion and overdrive rather than giving the sense of like, okay, it's going to sound like a Soldano, it's going to sound like a Marshall or whatever. It's just that genericness of it. That's what I appreciate about like a really good like overdrive pedal or distortion pedal. Like, that I still haven't got one, but the Brown Protein, like I'm still super into it. That to me, when I played the Nobles side, is just like a generic overdrive sound, and it sounds dirty.
Yeah.
But what's so great about that is it just allows me to play a song and fit, like where I'm like, all right, I'm playing this part, but I can just hear this spikiness in the at 3K, or I can hear
maybe why country guitar players froth the ODR one, why it's like the standard, because if you're playing guitar in Nashville and you're recording, that's what you're there to do. Like you're there to just contribute. You know, I got an analogy for you, Troy. We got the SLO 100, the 5150, and the dual rectifier. And like, you know, I don't own an SLO, but I own a Hot Rod 50. It's close enough, no matter what anyone tells you. It's the thing. That amp is not a 5150. Like you play through it. It's a different vibe. Apologies to anyone who's not an Australian rules football fan, but the SLO is Buddy Franklin.
Okay. Yep.
It's one of a kind. It's a super athlete. You know, you never get another one like it.
Yep.
Kind of thing. You know, it may not be able to take a mark over its head, but it picks up the ball on the wing and it's unstoppable. You know, like you're just like one of a kind. The 5150.
Go on.
It's a few things. You know, there's been the Jack Rewald edition. There's currently the Charlie Curnow edition. There was a run of Harry Mackay's, which were really unreliable.
So
but they won a Coleman once.
We're talking full
forwards.
We're talking
full forwards.
Okay.
It's a bit of a Josh Kennedy, actually.
Okay. Right.
You know, it's going to be good for 600 to 700 goals over its career. You know, couple of goals a game. Mostly reliable, might get a dodgy knee or something like that and miss a few games. But then the dual rectifier, it's Matthew Pavlich. It can play full forward. And when it plays full forward, it's all Australian worthy. But it can also play centre half back. And you can also run it through the midfield, even though it's a big amp.
Yep.
Even though it's a big unit, you can play it through the mids and it will dominate. So, yeah.
All right.
And a lot of these Victorians out there will be like, Pavlich, he's no good. Pavlich is probably the greatest player of his generation, but
353 games for Fremantle.
He played for Freo.
Yep.
Mate, Pav at full forward, like, you know, probably in the top 3 full forwards at the time.
Yep.
Pav at centre half back, probably in the top 3 centre half backs. He's a recto. He's a 3-channel rectifier of a man, and now he's just hanging around Perth buying sausage rolls with his kids.
I saw him at the Paw Patrol movie.
Yeah, exactly.
The premiere of the Paw Patrol movie. I'm there. Matthew Pavlich is there. You know, all the stars, basically.
This is
Darren
the point
Reed
where this podcast. Yeah, this is where this podcast has jumped the shark. So, the last thing that I'll say about Matthew Pavlich is, it's also easy to forget that the dual rectifier, like this, you know how it says dual rectifier solo on some of them. There's also like the tremor verb and the rectiverb, and there was the heartbreaker. They had all these other. I think it was meant to be a line of amps, and then like kind of like JCM 800 was actually a line of amps, but everyone's like 2203, 2204. That's the best circuit in there. So yeah, there's also these other ones out there. Was Incubus like? Why do I think Mike Einziger and tremor verb?
Yeah,
did he use a tremor verb?
He still does, I think.
There you go. So that's one amp I would really, really like to acquire at one point. You can still see them for reasonable prices where I feel like Rev Gs are just...
Yeah, one came up about 12 months ago for, what was it? It was about 2.4-ish, 2,400, which is not too bad. There was that, and there was also a couple of other amps in within the same window, and I just did not have the cash for it. Like it was...
Yeah.
It just wasn't going to happen. So it'd be cool to add it to the collection. That Fryette, the VHT Pitbull's still up for sale. So that hasn't gone yet.
That's pretty interesting. I will also, just before we go, because I actually have to get moving, but man, what a year for gear. I'm 10 days in and I still haven't bought anything, but there was a dual rectifier recording preamp that popped up, messaged the guy, had just sold a JVM for 1,000 Australian dollars, so like $600-700 US. Messaged the guy. As I was chatting to him, the ad changed from available to sold.
Oh, no.
And then there was that Charvel that had been plecked with a stainless refret for like 800 Australian dollars. And I was like, umming and ahhing about it. I went to find the ad yesterday, sold.
Yeah.
So I feel like 2024, there's going to be a lot of gear. There's going to be a lot of stuff popping up used. I feel like it's becoming a buyer's market again.
The unfortunate reason for that is usually people have to sell their beloved items, and that's a shame.
Luxury goods coming up for sale normally means general life stuff not so good. So
but it's I don't want to rub that in anybody's face. I've got stuff for sale. No one wants to fucking buy that. I've had
Hey, I've sold the first 10 days of this year. I've sold a bunch of stuff as well. So it's. Yeah, I'm saying these things. I'm interested in buying stuff because I've just got a bunch of cash floating around from things that, I've probably lost money on over the last year or two. But I think it was like, start of 2020, 2021, used gear prices went berserk. So it's more, I think it's less that like they're coming down and more that like they're coming to that midpoint between where they were and where they would have been. Yeah.
If only that happens with house prices as well, mate. But
yeah, imagine
that. I did buy one.
What a time to be alive!
I did buy one thing yesterday, by the way. I got a CS7 True Tone power supply for $75.
Nice.
Which is pretty happy about that. I had to drive to Palmyra to buy it, but it was worth it.
So $175.
Yeah, it was. I really ummed and ahed about that one because I'm just getting way too lazy to drive more than about 20 minutes from my house. But that worked out.
I live like 45 minutes away from everyone, and I'm not interested in driving 15 minutes. So that's probably a good control on me just buying stupid stuff.
Yep.
That's what I tell myself anyway. Anyway, we were going to talk about 5150s and SLS. Let's do that another time.
Next time.
We've got some guests coming up who know about these things that we can tell you about maybe on the next episode. Otherwise, thanks so much for tuning in. Again, like, subscribe, join Troy's OnlyFans, go and watch Matthew Pavlich highlights on the YouTube, and we'll see you all for the next episode. Cheers.
Bye.